Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar for CPE, Mastering HITRUST, Simplifying Certification and Advancing AI Security. Today, we will be learning from leaders at BARR Advisory as well as HITRUST to gain a deeper understanding of how HITRUST can streamline your risk management and compliance efforts in today's complex cybersecurity landscape. I will have the speakers introduce themselves in just a moment, but before I do, let me tell you a little bit about BARR Advisory. So BARR is a cloud-based security and compliance solutions provider specializing in cybersecurity consulting and compliance for companies with high-value information in cloud environments like AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. A trusted advisor to some of the fastest-growing cloud-based organizations around the globe, BARR simplifies compliance across multiple regulatory and customer requirements in highly regulated industries, including technology, financial services, healthcare, and government. So now let's get things started with a few housekeeping items. A friendly reminder that if you are attending today's webinar for CPE credit, you must complete all 3 knowledge checks. Whether your answers are right or wrong is irrelevant, but your participation is required for CPE. Please utilize the Q&A feature on Zoom to submit any questions that you have, and we will attempt to answer as many as possible during our time together. If we don't get to your question, one of the speakers will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Also, a recording of today's presentation will be provided after the event via email in case you missed something that you'd like to revisit or share with a colleague. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, Brianna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and provide some of your background?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Plush. I'm a senior consultant in the Attest practice here at BARR Advisory. I serve as the field manager on our HITRUST engagements, and I've been with BARR for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I was a senior in IT risk advisory at Ernst & Young. Jeremy, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Jeremy Huval, Innovation Officer with HITRUST. Been at HITRUST for about 6 years. And I have the pleasure of leading up new and exciting initiatives that we think can bring value to the market and bring value to our organization's risk management stance and cybersecurity posture and their TPRM needs. And most recently, I worked very heavily with HITRUST and a number of customers, assessors, and other industry leaders on developing the AI cybersecurity certification that we'll talk about today. So hello, everyone.
Awesome. And I'll close us out here. My name is Steve Ryan. I'm one of the managers over here at BARR Advisory, and I lead our HITRUST practice as a whole. I've been at BARR for a little over 3 years now, and prior to BARR, I was at a large Boston-based regional firm, helping out spin up their HITRUST practice, as well as a number of other frameworks out there. So excited to talk to you all today. Awesome. So let's talk about our learning agenda today. So we're going to cover a number of topics here, some more high level, and then what most of you are probably here for, the AI security assessment. Of course, we want to bring Jeremy on with that. To his point, he helped out vastly with creating that. But yeah, we'll talk about, why would an organization choose HITRUST? Really that framework overview. What is HITRUST? What are we looking at? All right, great. We know what HITRUST is. Let's get into the assessment types there. What does the E1 mean? What does an I1 mean? What does an R2 mean? We'll go through the assessment process, both thinking at it from the assessor point of view, the client point of view, and then we may have some insights shared from the HITRUST point of view as well. And then, like I said, we'll close that out with just talking through the AI security assessment and certification here. Awesome. So why HITRUST? So as we get into this, right, I mean, the graphics speak for themselves. 99.4% of HITRUST certified environments did not have a breach last year, or in the past 2 years, I should say, whereas 0.6% have had a security breach reported. You can look at the industry standards and it's apples to oranges, right? It's incredible the low number of security breaches that happened. And really, that's because of where HITRUST came from. So really, HITRUST it comes from many, many different authoritative service sources or frameworks that are out there. And it really created that one major assessment to meet those multiple compliance requirements across the board there. It really takes the best practices from each one of them. To that point, and because of that, it's really considered the gold standard for healthcare organizations, and it certainly is the most widely adopted healthcare framework that is out there. Not really a surprise there, as there aren't all that many really high or healthcare specific frameworks out there. Now, let's keep that in mind, though. HITRUST is not just for healthcare organizations. Yeah, maybe it started in the healthcare space, but you can look at that secondary graphic there and see 35.6 are information technology based. We have retail organizations that are getting HITRUST certified, manufacturing. Healthcare definitely does take up a very good portion of it as well, but HITRUST has done a great job of increasing what HITRUST is to really get a well-rounded picture of that framework to make sure it applies to everybody. And it's quickly becoming not just the gold standard for healthcare, but across most industries here as well. So HITRUST really assists with third-party risk management. And how they do that is it streamlines the process for HITRUST or certified organizations, meaning you are now looking at various vendors and various organizations that are all following the same rule book there. You can see how clients or those vendors are matching up, how they're meeting those compliance requirements, or maybe where they're lacking, so you can make the best informed decision of where you want to have your data stored, transmitted, or processed, so that you can provide the best trust to your customers as well. And most importantly, HITRUST is a very special organization. I'll talk about this in a moment here as well, where it supports continuous improvement of the organization. It's not necessarily just hey, check the box. You got that HITRUST cert, you're done, you're in a good spot. HITRUST is really focused on continuing that security and control environment to get better year after year as well. Awesome. So let's really talk about that framework overview. We know what HITRUST is, but what is it? So again, as I alluded to here, HITRUST is one comprehensive and threat adaptive framework. Now, keyword there is threat adaptive. As we know, right, for example, HIPAA is finally getting a refresh. Their last refresh was 2013. Other frameworks out there, it's been a couple of years, every so often. HITRUST is continuously looking at the threat environment. They have real-time intelligence, and they're constantly looking at those threats that are out there, the risks in, just being in this industries or in the various industries, and then making sure that the HITRUST framework aligns to those threats. If it doesn't, they very quickly will enhance that framework or add additional controls where they need to meet that ongoing threats. Jeremy, if you could just talk a little bit more about that threat adaptiveness of the HITRUST, because I know that's one of the things you guys are most excited about in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for describing it in so much detail. We think it's an important differentiator about our framework. And the idea is that an organization's chosen security framework, controls framework, is going to help them really anticipate the necessary controls. But if you look at the frequency of updates to the frameworks that are out there from many, many, many standard setting bodies and other sources of guidance and laws, regulations, controls frameworks, etc., they do not keep pace with the cybersecurity landscape and do not keep pace with the techniques that are being used by adversaries. So HITRUST developed an approach whereby we analyze real world threat intelligence activity, threat intelligence articles, which aggregate sort of indicators of attack, indicators of compromise, to really understand what's going on out there in the wild, so to speak. And we then use the minor attack framework to crosswalk that activity against our control framework to say, you know what it looks like, this particular threat is so much more relevant than it was the prior time or the prior time or the prior time. We need to have sufficient mitigations and detections in everyone's control environment that's certified. And everyone's think about certified really needs to anticipate these security controls because they're so relevant to prevent breaches and stop the bad things from happening. And that's really what all this is about. And we do that constantly. It always, always, always happens behind the scenes. And so users of the latest versions of our frameworks can enjoy the sort of the fruits of that labor.
Awesome. Yeah, it's something that's obviously so unique to the HITRUST framework. And obviously, as you see there, V11.4, it has over 50 of those major security and privacy related standards. Obviously, keeping in mind the ISO standards, HIPAA, GDPR, right? But also that inclusion of that threat adaptive framework and keeping in pace or outpacing those other frameworks with just saying, hey, there's a new threat tomorrow, we're going to tackle that. So definitely very unique of HITRUST. So with that said, let's get into how HITRUST is really broken down here. So there's 19 HITRUST assessment domains. Now, if you look at those 19 domains, I don't think anybody would be surprised or caught off guard by what you're seeing there, right? Information protection program. How are you guiding? How are you building your information management system to really govern that practice? You have configuration management. How are you ensuring their security? Throughout your code or change management process, building those security baselines there as well. You get into audit logging. How do you have processes in place to, alert on incidents or retroactively review those incidents? And you have some good controls in place over that. Risk management, by far one of the most important aspects of any security posture. How are you really supposed to put in controls over your environment if you don't know what risks you're trying to prevent from happening there? So again, I could go in depth as to every single one of these 19 and why they're so unique or what have you. But at the end of the day, these are very standard groups of controls and very standard groups of domains, I should say, to provide that continuous improvement over your posture, that continues to stay up to date with those ongoing threats in the environment there. Awesome. And I think with that, it comes to our first knowledge check here as well. Awesome. So as a quick hitter, true or false, there are 19 domains within the HITRUST CSF. I'll give a couple of moments here for the results to come in, and we'll go from there. All right. So yep, 80% true. Yep, exactly. So as we saw in that last slide there are those 19 domains split out across various sectors of your organization's control environment. And with that, we'll let Bree talk about the HITRUST assessment types.
Thank you, Steve. All right, so there are 3 assessment options for organizations to consider when seeking a HITRUST certification, and I'll go into a deeper dive onto each in a few minutes, but I'll give you a brief overview here and then we can expand. So if you take a look at this graphic on the left here, it's a great visualization of how we want you to think of these assessment types, kind of like a tier or nesting dolls, with the requirement statement composition of each building upon the ones before. And the level of effort directly correlates to the level of assurance each provides. So starting off with the E1 assessment, while it is the lowest level of assurance, it's the essentials of security. So it focuses on foundational controls that each organization should have in place that prepares them for the most critical cyber threats. It establishes benchmarks for them and identifies coverage gaps. As you can see, this assessment is 44 requirements, takes around 3 months to obtain, and is valid for 1 year. And then building upon that, we have the I1 assessment, and it's comprised of requirements with the leading security practices. So it will have all of those 44 foundational controls at the E1, and then some to get us to 182 total requirements, a more moderate level of assurance and validity for 1 year, with the pursuit of an I1 taking around half a year to obtain. And finally, we have the R2 assessment. This is the highest level of assurance with the most expanded coverage of practices and the most tailored to the organization itself. This can be anywhere from 200 or more controls, depending on the scope. And it's valid for 2 years with an interim assessment to be completed in the off year. And it typically takes about 1.5 years to 2 years for organizations to obtain. So if we could jump to the next slide, Candace, I'll take us through deep dives into each. All right, so because all of the E1 requirements can be found in both the I2 and R2 assessments, the E1 often functions as an excellent starting point for organizations that, want time to implement more robust control environments to later pursue I1 and R2 assessments. They might need to show a milestone towards achievements in pursuit of I1 or R2 assessments, or they're new to HITRUST. So that's why E1 is often referred to as a good stepping stone to other certifications. But for many organizations, the E1 assessment is their destination. So the E1 is often right for startups, organizations that have a lower level of risk, that just need to demonstrate that they've got the essential cyber hygiene in place. It's also desirable for organizations that are looking for lower costs and faster turnaround on the certification, while still receiving, a reliable review of their business units, their deployed platforms, any new third-party business partners, existing vendors, and whatnot. So Reader's Digest here for the E1, it's the lowest cost and effort for the certification while still providing coverage over the essential requirements of security. All right, next up is the I1. So the I1 assessment might be more suitable for organizations of moderate complexity with more robust established information security programs in place to demonstrate, protection against current and also emerging threats, which can help meet their compliance and contractual obligations. So the I1 delivers more reliability through review of the 182 controls, while still maintaining a lower cost than the R2 and a quicker turnaround. The I1 looks at the implementation of all of these requirement statements and is valid for 1 year and is eligible for a rapid recertification after the initial comprehensive certification is obtained. All right, and finally, we've got the R2, which is the highest level of compliance with 200 or more control requirements, depending on the organization's scope and risk profile and what is applicable to them. So this is suitable for organizations that are potentially a higher level of risk. They might be more complex or processing larger amounts of sensitive data. But the R2 assessment examines each requirement at the policy, procedural, and implementation level. And it can also generate supplemental reports, such as the NIST scorecard report and the HITRUST Insights report for HIPAA. So this is a good route to take for organizations that are looking to bundle some additional reports to show their stakeholders. But naturally, these R2 assessments are a larger level of effort, and they are valid for 2 years. And an interim assessment is completed in the off year to demonstrate that a sample of those controls are still operating and to demonstrate any progress on corrective actions taken since the initial certification. All right, and I think that'll take us to our knowledge check number 2. Okay. So which of the following HITRUST assessments is the most comprehensive and robust, recommended for complex organizations that process a large amount of highly sensitive data? All right, very good. Awesome, great results. Yes, it is the R2 assessment. Good job, everyone. All right, and I think I'm going to throw it back over to you, Steve, for the HITRUST assessment process.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Bree. As you guys saw, right, and I'll get into this more of how this correlates with the pathway to high trust certifications. Those various assessment levels Bree talked about, they are all, combined, if you would, meaning that the E1 is those 44 controls that then are the 44 foundational control sets of that I1 that is 182, and then that feeds up into the R2. So again, as Bree mentioned, right, it's great stepping stones to increase your level of certification or, security posture there. But it's also keeping in mind, maybe you don't have to get that R2, that E1 is perfect for you, or that I1 is perfect for you. And it's really a decision to be made between yourselves and the clients of what risks do we pose to the organization, but also out there of how much trust do we want to portray to our client base, right, and our key stakeholders. So to talk through those pathways of the HITRUST to certifications, first off, right, we're going to want to talk through scoping and have a readiness phase. We want to know your environment as well as you guys know your environment, right, as the clients. So that assessment is really going to be a combination of you all going through that process of saying, okay, here's where we stand on those controls. And then the assessor can assist with that assessment phase. Again, barring a couple of different teams there for independence reasons, of course, but making sure that that readiness is getting you fully ready to go for that validation. The way that we treat readinesses here are we want you to feel like you're going through that audit. So when we actually do the validated audit, you've already done that once before, right? And it's that true hands-on phase of the assessment process here, where it's a lot of collaboration between both the assessor and the organization or the assessed entity as needed there throughout that process. Now, of course, as a result of any readiness phase, there are definitely going to be some gaps. I trust you may have some more gaps than normal, depending on what level you go through, right? R2, you're looking at policy, procedure, and implementation. E1, you're looking at 44 controls to be implemented. So really, this is where we work together, right? We had those recommendations for you to implement to be compliant with the HITRUST standard. We want to make sure we go through those and we want to look at them and say, okay, how are you meeting those? How are you going to meet them? Again, not one size fits all here. So keeping in mind that something that works for one organization may not work for another, but there are still ways to meet those HITRUST requirements at the end of the day. So those are how to think about through that phase there. Now, once all gaps are complete, we're in that meat and potatoes phase. This is what everybody came for. We're going to go through that validation and hopefully get you a HITRUST certification. This is where it's that traditional audit, right? The auditor is going to request some evidence. We're going to test that evidence, and we're going to submit that to HITRUST. Again, all the hard work should have already been done through the readiness phase and remediation phase. Now you're just showing the world what you did and how great your control environment is and your security posture is. So that's where we do all the testing as your external assessor. Again, it'll feel like old hat at that point from the client side because you've gone through this before for the readiness phase. It's just grabbing those refresh screenshots, showing that it was in place for that period of time there, and going from there. So this is where HITRUST is very unique again. Now, in most audits, talking your SOC 2, your ISOs, right? Phases 1 through 3, you're done. It's game over. You get your report, call it a day. With HITRUST, the assessor is not the final piece of that puzzle there, right? We're going to, as your assessor, get all that testing evidence, and we're going to submit through the MyCSF object to show HITRUST that this client is good to go. Here is their assessment. Here's all of our testing. Then HITRUST comes in and does a quick QA over the assessment. They're going to pick a sample of controls across those domains, make sure that the testing was up to standard, make sure all of the evidence actually makes sense and meets the requirement, and really provide that, we'll call it independent assurance over that report, where HITRUST is providing their true hands-on on every single report that's issued to, again, go back to what I was talking about with why HITRUST. It's a standardized report that everyone gets HITRUST QA'd throughout that process there. And then finally, once we get through the HITRUST QA process, there's always some back and forth with the QA assessor because they like to ask those questions, of course. We're then going to issue those deliverables that can be downloaded directly from the MyCSF tool. And of course, there is a marketing package that HITRUST sends once you're done because you want to celebrate that. No matter what phase or what assessment type you go through, that's a huge, huge win for your organization. And again, talking through the QA process, Jeremy, I don't know if you want to add additional context around the QA and why that's such a unique differentiator for the HITRUST process.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And one of the things, like you mentioned, that really differentiates HITRUST is quality. We feel that if an organization receives a HITRUST certification, the parties relying on that certification can be confident that when that report says a control is in place, be sure that control is in place, it passed. And the benefit of that is there's sort of apples to apples comparison of, for example, vendors in your vendor population. There's benchmarking capabilities that say, look, my control environment in the physical security domain, for example, compares here versus here with industry standards or others that have submitted to HITRUST. And there's just numerous benefits of having really consistent quality and consistent reliability of the certification reports and the outcomes reflected in those certification reports. And we don't take it lightly that this is an extra step that's a bit unique and maybe a bit unexpected for those used to different types of assurance programs. So we do everything we can to be transparent about, hey, this is how much time we think it's going to take. This is what we're looking at. These are the questions that are open. Here's what you can expect. And I'm really happy to say that there's very, very little surprises here. Our assessor network, BARR included, is just so good at doing these assessments that we think it's important, but it's unusual for something to take a hard left at this turn. I'm happy to say after so many years, there's a lot of maturity in this process. But we think it's pretty important to have this quality review. HITRUST is the certification body for HITRUST reports. We're the only one that issues them. And we use assessor professional services firms like BARR to actually do the assessments. HITRUST doesn't do the assessments. We review the assessment work and issue certification. So that's unique, but we think it's important for a consistent reliability bar here.
Awesome. Thanks for the additional context, Jeremy. I always love getting the HITRUST perspective on that differentiator there. Awesome. And with that, that brings us to our third and I believe final knowledge check here before we get into where Jeremy steals the show here. So with that, yes, let's go live with the poll. So quick multiple choice question here. Are HITRUST assessment certifications or attestations? And we'll give a couple of seconds here for those questions or those responses to come in, I should say. Awesome. So a little bit more split on this one. Again, at the end of the day, HITRUST assessments are certifications. As Jerry mentioned, right, they're going to be issued by HITRUST and that they are the certification body. And it's not just an attestation where an auditor could come in and say, yep, they're good, but rather it is that formal certification from a certified decision maker there, or certification body, I should say. So that is the HITRUST 101. Again, we definitely want to make sure we saved quite a bit of time here to talk through HITRUST's new and exciting AI security certification. So with that, Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you to bring us home here.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, next slide, please, Candace. So we documented a great deal of detail behind what I'm about to describe in certification specification that you can access online right now. So feel free, for those interested, to take out your phone, scan that QR code, and follow along. It's a wealth of detail. If you print it out, it's hundreds of pages, and I'll talk a bit about why. But in this link, we've got a lot of what we're covering with a bunch more detail. There are actual requirements that are included in this assessment certification, crosswalks to numerous authoritative sources, etc. So do check it out if you're at all interested. And I will not take offense if you look at that while I talk. It may reinforce what we're talking about, so feel free. Next slide, please. So it started a bit like this for me personally. Whenever ChatGPT took the world by storm a few years ago now, immediately we looked at our control framework and said, you know what? I don't know that we have coverage for all the new controls that may be needed for this emerging technology. With any new technology, there is new associated risk, and we acknowledged very quickly that AI, and specifically generative AI when it took off, also had very unique and novel risk aspects and security threats that accompanied it. And we looked critically at our own framework and said, you know what, organizations that are looking to adopt HITRUST to really get that comfort and perspective that their cybersecurity posture is as it should be to address relevant threats and to address the relevant risks. Those customers of ours and the relying parties, the people that read those reports and depend on the accuracy and completeness of those reports, are going to need additional content. We have to expand our framework and our capability to address the novelties of AI. And so that spawned about an 18-month journey for us that continues today to expand our offering, to expand our framework against the backdrop that adoption of new technology, AI, no exception, is going to change things, and the control environment has to change too. So we acknowledged quickly, like I said, the HITRUST CSF at the time did not sort of have the controls necessary to meet it. So we worked very hard to expand the controls within our control framework to actually have things that mitigate and detect and protect against the novelties of AI and AI threats. And we did this while trying to maintain a number of things that are kind of common and expected in our framework. Our controls framework is very prescriptive. If you look at it just before we even started adding cybersecurity content, there was approximately 2,800 really granular control requirements in there. And we wanted to maintain sort of a granular detail on the AI content that we added. And with all the controls we added to our framework, we wanted them to be precise and measurable enough to be assessed by organizations, assessors, and to be looked at and say, you know what, I think I understand this good enough to implement it, and I understand why it's critical, and I understand what threats are associated with it. So the specificity and measurability of those requirements is important. And we couldn't just expand our framework alone. We had to also expand our assurance program that enables that reliable reporting. So your stakeholders, internal and external, that need to know about how you're securing that AI system have to be a mechanism to actually communicate that assessment outcome and the maturity of those AI controls. And so we've expanded our assurance offerings as well through this new AI cybersecurity certification. So zooming out, the problem we're trying to solve is organizations are adopting AI, and through that AI adoption, there are new threats, new risks that they have to address. And there has to be a way to actually demonstrate to stakeholders that those risks are being addressed. And this initial AI offering from HITRUST focuses on cybersecurity. So I'll dive a bit more into that. Next slide, please. So as a certification, there's some characteristics that are common to other HITRUST certifications, and I'll talk a bit about that. And then there's some characteristics that are sort of new, and you've got to really understand kind of how this fits into the overall HITRUST certification offering machine that was described by Brianna and Steve. So this is a new certification in the sense that you go through an assessment, readiness, and validated, and you will receive a certification report that is also forward-looking, just like our other ones. But this is optional accompaniment. And what I mean by that is you're going through HITRUST certification, an E1 or an I1 or an R2, and let's say the in-scope system that you've included to be within the scope of the assessment uses an AI model. You don't have to include this AI certification. It's an optional, and we expect that most organizations using some form of AI within their scope platform will include this, but it's optional. And the focus, and I've underlined it, the focus is on security of the overall AI system. And I underlined it for a very particular reason. We learned early on that it's not precise enough to say we're working on something dealing with AI security, because AI security seems like it would be precise enough. It's not, because AI is being used by security teams to help perform security controls. So that's like security with AI. AI is also being used by adversaries to be better at doing bad stuff. That's like AI, that's security with AI. This is security of the AI system, meaning these are the security components and controls necessary to ensure that the AI-enabled system is locked down appropriately and is protected against those cybersecurity threats that are specific to AI systems. And it covers several different types of AI and AI scenarios that I'll get into. And we're trying to make it as forward-looking as possible. And one of the unique things about HITRUST is we update our control framework and offerings very frequently, such that we're able to continue to refine this as the AI technology grows and evolves and changes. But I'm happy to say in this current offering, it does support several different AI use cases and contexts and deployment avenues that companies are using today. So it's got specific content for RAG, for use of embeddings, for fine tunings, for agents, but it also supports different types of AI, not just Gen AI. So I'll talk about that on the next slide. Actually, slide after that. But we're on this slide. Who benefits from this? Like, why would somebody even think about going through this? Well, there's multiple parties that we think can benefit from adopting an AI cybersecurity certification. So for organizations that are using those AI products, using AI solutions, this just helps manage the complexity of the AI solution security. It helps clearly identify which AI security control responsibilities may be shared between the providers of different AI components. It enables more confidence in the AI solutions used, and it really just helps better manage third-party AI security risks. And several of what I just mentioned spill into benefiting the solution providers themselves, the organizations that are actually offering the AI-enabled system, as well as the providers of any AI platform as a service or cloud service providers that are offering some AI component as well. And for me, it's about speed of solution adoption. In our experience, one of the things that hinders adoption of AI are questions about, how do I know that if I adopt this technology, it's going to be secure? How do I know if I adopt this technology, it won't mess with my compliance stance with this or that or the other framework or law or regulation? Having an approach like this helps proactively address those questions that could otherwise put a big stop sign on adopting that new technology. So speed of solution adoption, we think, is very critical here. Next slide, please. This is for AI providers specifically. And what we mean by that is consistent with the ISO 22989 definition. An AI provider is the organization that's offering that AI-enabled product or service. So this includes organizations that have stood up a software as a service that uses an AI model or has some AI capability built into it. It also includes AI product providers directly, or AI platform providers that may be used by those AI software as a service providers. For example, AI PaaS offerings through something like AWS or Google or Microsoft. Certainly, the AI providers are the audience for this, because it's the AI providers that would be sharing those assurances over the AI system security. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is the slide I was referring to. A lot of work was done behind the scenes to ensure that organizations that have been using AI for a while now won't be left out. We're all aware that generative AI got all the love for the past few years in terms of attention and research funding and innovation teams focus. But for other organizations that have been using machine learning in sort of the predictive AI sense, they're saying, look, like, this is new, it's great, but there's also a lot of other types of AI. And so we did a lot of work with industry stakeholders and organizations that rely on HITRUST for a number of means to understand what they needed for an AI security offering. And when this AI security certification came out, like, what is it key for it to cover? And we understood very quickly that it has to address generative AI, meaning organizations using Gen AI need to be able to achieve this certification. It has to be relevant for them. But also organizations using predictive AI models, or even the older rules-based AI models, expert systems, need to be able to use this as well to demonstrate that they're addressing the cybersecurity threats specific to those types of AI. And for the Gen AI specifically, there's a lot of different deployment scenarios here. that have their own nuances and their own controls needs and their own cybersecurity threats. So we covered those as well. There's content in this offering for agents, plugins, embeddings, AI paths, RAG, etc. So those looking at this maybe a year in the future might be saying, oh, what about this next new thing? Because past Jeremy and past BARR and past Brianna and past Steve, they didn't even have this on the slide. Well, like I said, HITRUST will continue to update and iterate our framework to keep it relevant in light of the sort of the changes that will happen in this technology. And next slide, please. So if we talk about what this certification and assessment is not, I thought it'd be really important to help draw sort of the circle around what it is and isn't. And first and foremost, it's important to understand that this doesn't consider all the risks introduced through the use of AI. Using AI as an organization, just using it, like maybe, for example, your marketing team uses it, some form of AI to generate new AI copy, or maybe your finance team uses AI to generate more accurate forecasts for sales for the next quarter, or what have you. The AI usage realm brings about a number of risks at the AI usage layer that are not addressed here. And also, AI is inclusive of many different types of risks and considerations that have largely been grouped under what the industry is calling trustworthy and responsible AI. And this includes stuff like, is adoption of AI by society a good thing in terms of impact to the climate? Are privacy considerations happening? Safety considerations and respect for human well-being. There's a number of things that have to be considered that aren't necessarily addressed here, but an organization's overall AI risk management process certainly need to consider. HITRUST is doing a number of things very strategically to very carefully address these different things. For example, the risks brought about through AI usage are being added, controls for those risks around AI usage are being added into our next major version of our framework, V12, and acknowledgement that those controls are needed for more than just providers. Every organization using AI needs these controls, not just the company that stood up the AI system, but the companies that use it as well. And on the trustworthy and AI piece, we are going to expand our AI security, our AI certification offerings to consider different areas of trustworthy and responsible AI over time. But we felt cybersecurity as the foundation can't be ignored, because without a secure AI system, it's very difficult to achieve some of those subsequent things like privacy and like transparency. And I guess it's important to say this is not exhaustive. This just by nature can't be guaranteed to cover all of the different nuances of maybe newly introduced AI security regulations, or maybe like contractual obligations you may have dealing with AI security. We designed it very intentionally to cover what we think are the most relevant mitigations and detections for the most prevalent and common AI security threats, as well as kind of long-standing threats that are exacerbated through the use of AI and the adoption of AI. Next slide, please. So you may be thinking, we use ISO 42001. Does that mean we can't use this HITRUST AI security certification? And for those not familiar, ISO 42001 is very new. There's a lot of excitement around it. It's an AI management system standard released from ISO and IEC, and its stated purpose is to provide guidance for establishing and implementing and maintaining an AI management system. So think of it as a peer to like your ISO 9000 quality management system, or a peer to like your ISO 27001 security management system. So it's a management system standard from ISO. It has a very broad scope. So in it, it includes guidance to organizations such as determine for yourself whether climate change is a relevant issue, as well as stuff like understanding the competitive landscape for trends in new products and services using AI systems. So certainly very important, but much broader than the security scope that I've discussed here. And it's important because your AI management system within your own walls has to consider more AI risks than just security. So ISO 14001 intentionally doesn't go deep into security. It outlines these sort of the broad expectations of your management system. Instead, it says the organization should combine generally accepted frameworks and other standards and their own experience to implement the critical processes, such as security, meaning ISO 40001 is designed to work nicely with things like this. And HITRUST is very, very excited to say that we are the first to market for an AI-centric security offering, an AI-centric security certification specifically, that really snaps in nicely with this, because the 40001 gives you the broad management system, and the AI cybersecurity certification sort of gives you the depth on this one area of AI risk. And we do publish a crosswalk for those that are have adopted 40001 and also considering or have adopted the AI cybersecurity framework from HITRUST and certification from HITRUST. Is accessible in that QR code there. Next slide, please. So it's also important to understand that it is not a standalone assessment, meaning if your goal is to achieve the HITRUST AI security certification, you would not only consider the AI security requirements. Instead, you would perform an E1 or an I1 or an R2 that addresses foundational cybersecurity across your IT platform. And you would add to it a number of AI-centric security controls, 44 specifically. Currently, with the current version of our framework, there are 44 AI security requirements included. And you've heard that number before in this webinar. There's also 44 requirements in the E1. They're different. So if you did an E1 with the AI security, you have 88 total requirements. Half would be around foundational IT security content, and the other half would be around AI-specific security content, as an example. Why did we do this? Well, we acknowledged very quickly that you cannot have AI security without having a secure platform within which the AI operates. In other words, AI is often an added capability to an IT system. So you've got to secure the IT system first. You can't just have security over that one little capability. Not to say it's little or trivialize it, but you've got to have kind of both foundational and AI specific. Next slide, please. So organizations that are already HITRUST certified can enjoy an even faster path to achieve this certification. And it would go something like this. You would, in the HITRUST assessment platform, create that E1 or I1 or R2 validated assessment. You'd inherit from your own assessment all the stuff you've already tested, and then you'd score and test all the newly added security requirements. You give that certification to HITRUST, in which case you've only tested those newly added security requirements and not have to retest all the stuff that's included in your certification. And at the end of the effort, you get 2 certification documents from HITRUST. You get your E1 or I1 or R2 certification and a separate standalone document that is your AI cybersecurity certification. So I bring that up to say, if you are already certified, don't think you have to wait until the start of your next certification cycle to even consider this. There's opportunity to actually not have to redo all that testing. You can leverage your own work there, leverage the content in your existing certification, and just focus on that new stuff and get sort of an updated report from HITRUST very quickly. So don't feel like you have to wait a year or 2 potentially to do this if this interests you. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in learning more about the HITRUST AI offering, there's 2 QR codes here. One is to the HITRUST AI Hub, where we've got a number of recorded sessions available, as well as documents to read and further details. Our contact information's on there. and BARR Advisory has content about this particular AI security certification as well. So that's the end of my content. I think we've got time for questions. Or I guess Steve or Brianna or Candace, any closing commentary before we get into that?
Not much on my end. I think I think I see a couple of questions at least in the chat as well. So definitely some time for that. But as we just appreciate having you on with us here, Jeremy, and very exciting stuff with the AI security, cybersecurity certification there.
Absolutely.
So thank you to Brianna, Jeremy, and Steve for this comprehensive and thoughtful discussion. So like they mentioned, we will open this up for questions that we've seen come in. We already have a few in here. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A feature or the chat. And with that, our first question is, I've heard my IT group talk about the NIST AI risk management framework. Is this that?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So the NIST AI Risk Management Framework is excellent piece of guidance that helps organizations think holistically about the risks introduced through deployment and use of AI in their company. And it covers the gamut of responsible and trustworthy AI. So it's got that focus around stuff like ethical use of AI, using and deploying AI safely, and respect for human well-being, transparency, explainability. It covers a lot more than just the cybersecurity aspect that we've talked about here. Although HITRUST in mid-2024, maybe Q3, I think, can't remember the exact, but we very recently stood up an offering just against the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. And we've also incorporated guidance from other AI risk management sources, for example, from ISO. But the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, such a good piece of content for those that are kind of in the NIST realm and use NIST and look to NIST. This isn't that. This is complementary, because this goes deep into AI security, where that one helps you do sort of a risk management program and risk analysis against sort of the more comprehensive, trustworthy, and responsible AI space.
Yeah, and I would love to kind of expand on that as well. And I think I see another question kind of similar to what I might be answering here as well in the chat. But I think it's a fantastic spot for organizations to start who are in that AI space, right? Kind of figure out what are those risks for my organization? What should I think about at a high level to then maybe go down that pathway of that HITRUST AI certification, get those foundations in place. I think Jeremy hit the nail right on the head. We can't just jump right to AI security, right? We have to have those core foundations in place. And then upon that, we can expand and continuously improve our control environment to really narrow in on, AI where we can.
Right, Steve, I think you were answering the what things should I consider doing now to prepare for achieving this AI security certification question. And so, Jeremy, if there's anything additional you'd like to add.
Yeah, absolutely. I would start with a comprehensive inventory of any use or deployment of AI within your organization. If you haven't already, it's really difficult to secure and control what you haven't identified yet. And in very large and complex organizations, it's often tough to figure out if there's any sort of maybe even shadow AI going on, or maybe prototyping of a AI capability within one of your flagship products. So certainly get the jump on inventorying your deployment and use of AI within your walls. And I guess on the flip side of this too, if you are using any AI-enabled systems provided by another organization, like one of your vendors, start thinking about what assurances you're getting from that vendor that they are doing all the things that we're talking about, that they're securing that AI capability appropriately. And you may be looking at what they're like, I don't know, what they could be giving you, a lot of variability. It could be a questionnaire, it could be a SOC 2, it could be an ISO, it could be a HITRUST report. Look at it and say, you know what? Whenever we bought your product, you were very loud about your use of AI and how great the AI capability is within your software. Now we're using it. Now we need assurances from you that you're securing appropriately. What do you got? And I think you're going to find that they don't have a lot. So this, what we're describing here, is an excellent tool for you to say, look, we need assurances. We need it more than just your thumbs up that you're doing it right. We need something like the HITRUST AI Cybersecurity certification from you.
So one of our other questions is, how many organizations in the US are certified for HITRUST?
So HITRUST doesn't share the specific numbers. Certainly there's a lot. I can't share the specifics. I can share that there's an organization called the Health Third Party Trust, H3PT, and they maintain a website for organizations that have HITRUST certifications, have opted in to kind of advertise their certification status and list themselves on the Health Third Party Trust H3PT website. So you can see a subset of HITRUST certified organizations on the Health Third Party Trust website. I'll share that we are very, very penetrated in the U.S. healthcare space, but not only U.S. healthcare and not only U.S. There's several international organizations and organizations outside the U.S. that have turned to HITRUST. So very, very comprehensive. Can't share the specifics, unfortunately.
Makes total sense. All right, we got a couple more in a few minutes, and so we should be able to power through these. Carrie asked, out of the 19 control domains, can you speak to how much those might overlap with the other attestations like SOC 2 and ISO 27001?
Good question. Steve, can you talk to SOC 2 coverage in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think it's really dependent upon what level of HITRUST you're going for, right? Again, keeping in mind if you want to go from a SOC 2 or an ISO 2 HITRUST, there's definitely going to be some work to be done. If you're going to an E1, certainly less work to be done versus an R2, depending upon it. However, if you're starting with HITRUST and going the other direction, right, you're going to have a lot of that work already completed with some Delta. Again, keeping in mind that HITRUST was built off of those frameworks that were already in place and taking the best aspects of each one. So I have a number of clients that, are E1 certified and also have a SOC 2, and there's very great overlap between the two of them. Obviously, I also have some clients that are R2 certified and also SOC 2. We see those SOC 2 assessments get a very nice beef up in their control set. Again, so that's kind of the best way for me to answer it. But again, going from a SOC to HITRUST, depending on the level, considerable amount of work needs to be done. E1, you're really almost there with some minor tweaks here and there. And Jeremy, definitely fill in the blanks where you could.
Yeah, no, great answer. I don't think I'd change the answer there.
Perfect.
We have one final question of, is the 200 control requirements for R2 available on HITRUST?
So the HITRUST CSF is actually a free download at HITRUSTalliance.net. So do check that out. And the 44 additional AI security requirements, you could read them all down to the requirement text in one of the QR codes we shared earlier here, in that which is the certification specification document. So there's certainly you have access to all this content if you're curious about what it would look like and how it compared to your existing control environment. And if you can't find what you need, HITRUST has a team of support experts and customer success managers that would love to get on the phone with you. And Steve's team certainly could help as well.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's special to call out specific to R2s, right? It could be 200 controls, it could be 1,200 controls, right? For R2 assessment, they are risk-based. So there's a number of factors or risk-driven questions that are in place that could spit out those control sets. Of course, they're going to correlate to the CSF that's publicly available. To get that narrow, though, what is the scope of my assessment type? You're going to want to go through that HITRUST process, purchase the MyCSF object, and really dive in deep to what does my control set look like specifically.
So with that, we are going to be concluding our CPE webinar for today. And thank you to everyone for attending and to our experts for sharing your experience and insight. We hope you found this information very valuable, and please watch your inbox for the email with the recording of this discussion. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.